All right, all right. Great afternoon, everyone, and happy lunch to all. Today, we're talking about estate planning, and this is one of the pillars to Sisters to Dream Network and Investment Group. I am your host, Dana McDuffy, and just a little bit about myself. I'm a licensed insurance agent as well as community activist with Sisters to Dream Network and Investment Group. And today, we're going to be talking about estate planning. And I'm so thankful and grateful that everyone has joined, and I have been able to reach out and to get some expertise on estate planning with my guest, Nareissa Smith. And just to give you a coming across is that when we talk about generating wealth and having wealth circulate through the community, we use that word so loosely. And when we use it loosely, we may not be doing the steps to take to protect the wealth and add some thought about, looking into getting a trust, looking into creating that will, and also to looking into estate planning, especially if you are a small business owner or an entrepreneur. And so just from an insurance perspective for me and in my profession and going out and seeing my clients, I'm finding that when educating them on the purpose and the value of having an insurance policy, and then we go to the next question of is, do you have a will? And 9 times out of 10, 50% of my clients, 50% of the clients that I have come in contact with do not have a will and have not started that preparation. And some of the services that I do provide is final expense. And as you know, final expense is just for that. A final expense policy is for your final expenses. And so this group or demographic group is anywhere from 45 on up to about 60. They have not prepared a will. So this is a concern for me. And so I started to do some research on this personally and professionally, because I want to be in a position to help others to get the information or direct them to the information that they need. Now, we do have to put a disclaimer out here. The purpose of this Lunch and Learn is purely educational, not to give you any legal advice, but to begin the steps in estate planning or even just creating that will. So I just want to give you an introduction of my guest. We have today Miss Nareissa Smith, Esquire. She is a blogger, a freelance writer specializing in law, race, and gender for over 10 years. She's a graduate of Howard University School of Law, as well as a graduate of Spelman College. And she has a very, very extensive background. And so upon doing my research, I came across an article that she wrote. And the article just provoked a lot of thought with me. It was to your wealth. And she wrote that in August of 2018. And I thought it was very interesting to read the article because the person that she had on the front was Aretha Franklin. And unbeknown to me, I know a person of great wealth and great stature. She did not prepare her estate. And so now her estate is caught up in probate court. And we have some other people that are our wealth, like John Singleton and Prince. They did not have an estate plan or a will updated will set aside to protect their assets. And now their families are held up in probate court. So now we want to go ahead and talk to Nareissa Smith, and I hope everybody welcomes her to our platform. And I just, Nareissa, so what prompted you to write the article personally and professionally?
First of all, hello, good afternoon, Dana. Hello, everyone who is listening at this time or in the future. There were a few things. At the time I wrote the article, you'll note that the article was on the African American Attorney Network. The African American Attorney Network was founded by Dwayne King, a classmate of mine at Howard University School of Law. And at the time, I was a lead blogger for the network. And in the planning sessions, Dwayne, myself, and Nadia Policard, who is the head of the social media marketing group, we all worked together to plan the content. And the idea had come up. We had all sort of seen, and I know sadly a lot of African Americans are aware of this, someone in the family passes, right? Someone in the family will pass away, and then as opposed to there being, a plan in place or planning the funeral, there's a GoFundMe page. Folks are scrambling to try to find the money, to have a burial for the loved one. And that had happened. So we had Dwayne was the one who said the idea, on this platform, we need to talk about estate planning and end of life issues. And all of us sort of agreed. We were like, well, yeah, this is a great idea. But we were working on other things. At the time, the Colin Kaepernick thing was very big at that time. There had been some retirements at the Supreme Court, and we were very focused on that. And then when Aretha Franklin passed, we were like, this is the time that we need to talk about this. So from a personal perspective, like many African Americans, I have seen, the GoFundMe pages and seen how families struggle after the death of a loved one. And from the professional standpoint, we realized that we could do something to help people understand the importance of estate planning.
All right, perfect. Yes. So with the article, can you just share some highlights from the article, Dying Without a Will has figured out, so that our audience will know?
Absolutely. Some of the highlights from the article are, as most folks are aware, when Miss Franklin passed, she passed without a will, even though she had a substantial estate. I believe it was somewhere valued at around $80 million. Wow. But in the state of Michigan, where she lived, there are a few terms that I'm going to use. And Dana, if you may, I'm going to, and I promise everyone, I'm a former professor, but I will not bore you to death. Promise.
Go ahead. We're here to educate.
All right. So let's see here. All right. So hopefully everyone can see this. Oops, I am not making it big enough. Change the view.
Okay, here you go.
Thank you. Sorry, I apologize for that. All right, so in order to really talk about this, there are a couple of terms that you need to know. And again, I promise this is not going to be boring. All right, so what is an estate? And again, the disclaimer applies. This is not legal advice, and this is not the full definition. It's a lot broader, but for purposes of this discussion, your estate is the property that you leave behind when you pass away. And it also includes all the assets that you have as well as the debts, and I'll come back to that. And just some important terms. So important terms you may have heard: last will and testament, right? Well, building on that term that you're probably familiar with, there's a couple of terms you need to know. A testator is a person who makes a will, right? That last will and testament. If you have a will, you become what is called a testator, right? But a person who dies without a will, the term is intestate, right? So that's what it means to die without a will. So if you die without a will, that is a bad thing for several reasons. And one of those reasons is if you die without a will, you do not control how your funds are dispersed upon your death. So for instance, with Miss Franklin, not only do you not control how those funds are dispersed, you also don't get advantage of a lot of different tax issues. So, first of all, even though the federal government has certain tax shelters, her estate was taxed by the state as well. So that cut the estate about from 80 million to about 40 million, roughly. I might be overestimating, but it was a big chunk. And then, according to Michigan's intestate law, Ms. Franklin then had to split it among her four sons, which I'm sure she probably would have wanted. But two classes of people are left out of that. Under that law, because all intestate laws, they're different in every state, but they all follow a fairly similar formula. They go to your next of kin. So for most people, if you're married, that's a spouse. And if you're unmarried, usually that will be your children. However, if your children are alive and you have grandchildren, your grandchildren get nothing. It goes to their parents, your children. And another important thing for Miss Franklin, which affects a lot of African Americans, there are a lot of African Americans who are married, of course, but like Miss Franklin, a lot of African Americans have informal partnerships where you might live with someone. And Miss Franklin had a longtime partner that she had lived with for over 25 years, I believe. And these intestate laws do not recognize those relationships at all.
Wow.
So if you are going to want to take care of everyone, if you want a niece or a nephew or a longtime romantic partner or who you are not married to, or a close friend, you need to have an estate plan in place.
Wow. Wow. So I just want to make note so everybody knows, because I didn't know these two terms. It's said to die in intestate. That is so powerful, right? There's several things that you said. That her taxes took was it almost half of her estate?
Yeah, I do believe it was. If it wasn't half, it was pretty close to it. It was like 35-40%. It was a sizable amount. Yeah, so that diminishes.
That is a huge. Mm-hmm. You said that diminished her estate down, and so
exactly.
When we die without
the amount. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah. So it reduced the amount of what she was able to actually give or pass down to her family. So that reduced the amount, because now what you're work for and to get and to own, and now you're sharing it with the state. And so as business owners and entrepreneurs, that is something that we don't want to do. We want to be able to continue to keep our wealth and protect those assets. That's why it's very important that you get that will and establish it, as well as if you come to a certain place where you're unable to do it yourself, that you do estate planning. Do you have anything else that you want to share by screen so we can
no, actually, but there is another thing I wanted to share about that article. One of the most interesting things that I found in that article, and it was something that I was pretty surprised to learn. As most folks who are interested in wealth know, land is a big driver of wealth creation. Land, real estate holdings can be. Well, one of the interesting things that happens with African Americans is African Americans have lost a significant amount of wealth over the years simply because failing to have wills. So for instance, if A dies intestate and has children B, C, and D, and leaves them the family plot of land, right? So dies without a will, they all share in it equally. But what happens on the day that B, C, and D can't agree on what should happen with the land? B wants to sell, C and D want to keep it. And then the law will do something called a partition. And that's a forced sale. And African Americans, there are folks who have researched this, and the term is called land loss for anyone who wants to look at it. It's fascinating. We could do a whole lunch and learn just on that. But these experts estimate that millions of dollars in African American wealth have been lost because of the failure to plan and or agree on how this land should be kept in the family. Whereas if a person had a will, they could say this land must stay in the family. You can set conditions with a will. Of course, within reason, some conditions, are unconstitutional, and won't be enforced. But, if you say, I want to give the land to so-and-so, and I hope that it will stay in the family, you can set those parameters and make it more likely that the land will stay in the family rather than exposing the family to a court fight, which will lead to legal fees on top of the lost funds that the family will suffer throughout that process.
Wow. So she said a lot right here. So we're talking about land laws, and that the African American community is suffering from not preparing or estate planning. And some of our assets are being lost and not being passed down from generation to generation. And so the part about wealth building, see, when we start making money and getting that cash flow, and of course, profit is better than wages, and we're making that profit, we're not taking the right steps to secure it. And so that is the purpose of this platform, is to reach out to people who have, blogged about it and taken an interest in it, because this is very important. And I just want to give some statistics. So as of 2012, nationally, there's about 2.6 million small businesses that are run by African Americans. That's according to the SBA. And then right here in North Carolina, there's 843,724 we own 34.5% of that. But here it is. So the Asian group, the Asian culture owns 34.5%. But what's so amazing here is that with the minority-owned businesses, the population that owns the most minority-owned businesses here in North Carolina is the Hispanic, Latino, and also of Hawaiian descent. And I thought that to be very, very interesting. But even so, with that, like what's running across the stream, less than 50% of African Americans have a living will. So just what are the steps that you can tell us without that are educational? Because we also, just keeping in with the disclaimer that the purpose of this lunch and learn is to purely educate and not to give legal advice. But what are some of the steps that you have discovered through your research that we can take to prepare that will?
Absolutely. And first of all, I want to differentiate, and I'm so glad you brought up the living will versus the traditional will. I'm going to talk about both of them, because I also want to circle back around to one of the reasons why I'm so happy to be working with Dana today, because insurance has to be a part of your end of life plan. So think of your estate plan and then also your full end of life plan, because there are a number of documents that you should be thinking about. And just in terms of, I just wanted to share with Dana, culturally, I think a lot of African Americans have two beliefs, I think, that kind of keep us from making either a living will or an actual traditional will. One is, well, I'm going to pray about it. It's going to all be okay. And I'm here to say, yes, you can pray about it, but the court is not going to take those prayers into evidence. Maybe a different court, but not the courts of law. So you can't just rely on faith, and a lot of people, when I was doing the research about Aretha Franklin, that is actually something that, when people were shocked to see, that this woman, of wealth, and stature, had not, made this plan. And a lot of people said, she did not want to confront her own mortality. She didn't want to have to think about it. And that's not a black thing. That's a black, white, everybody thing. You know, nobody wants to think about dying. Nobody wants to. However, it's important that you do. Because if you don't, again, the state is going to make very important decisions for you. All right. And that is a decision you might not want the state to make on your behalf, you know, or they'll have your next of kin make that decision. And maybe you are close to your family. Maybe you trust them to make those decisions. Maybe you don't. You know, maybe you don't want Pookie and them deciding, you know, what's going to happen. So that is another reason why you want to have a will in place. So let's talk about a traditional will, you know, dealing with your property, and then the living will and the other end of life documents that you need. So a traditional will is that last will and testament. That's the thing that says, you know, I want my, you know, Prince albums to go to so-and-so. I want my house on Beale Street to go to so-and-so. I want my business to be disposed of in this way. I want my debts to be disposed of this way. A lot of people don't realize this. Some people think, oh, well, I'm dead. My debts are gone. No, they are not. Collectors will come knocking on the door of your family and still will try to collect that money. There was a few nasty cases a couple years ago where people in their 60s and 70s had died owing student loans, and Sally Mae was knocking on the door not too long after. So that will allows you to specify how your assets and debts will be handled. Right? That's a key thing. And I said there were two things that keep African Americans from not drawing up wills. You know, one, you know, was sort of our faith-based culture. But the other one is a lot of people, when they hear, you know, about wills and estates, they think, well, that's only for people with, you know, millions of dollars. That is not true. In doing the research for this, one of the things I found is that the nastiest fights happen for people who have the least money. And why? It's that sentimental, the items with sentimental value. Oh, you got great grandma's cooking pot? Oh, no. Oh, wait, though that was granddaddy's watch. I wanted that. So whether you have a large estate, you know, with millions of dollars, or whether you think you have very little to leave behind, it is still worth your while to take the time to set out what you want to happen. It's very much worth your time. And think of it like this. You're not thinking of your own mortality. You're doing things that are going to give your heirs peace of mind once you're gone. You're going to help them have relationships. You're going to stop all the fights. You know, you're going to make them, you know, in other words, they're already going to be upset because they're mourning your passing. Don't give them extra drama to deal with after you're gone. So that's the first part. Now, with living wills are part of what a lot of folks refer to as end of life planning. And your will, your last will and testament is part of that. However, a lot of people, even if they think about the time when they're actually going to pass on, a lot of people fail to think about what happens when I'm older or in poor health, or even if I'm younger and in good health, but there's an emergency. A lot of people don't plan out, okay, what should happen during these times? Who's going to make my decisions? So a living will is this idea of what do I want to happen to me? You know, and there's a lot of different ways you can go about this. So there's these things called powers of attorney, right? A power of attorney, it's not, you don't need an attorney for it, but it's a legal document. And so in a medical power of attorney, for instance, you would say, you know, I give my spouse, you know, the authority to make any necessary medical decisions on my behalf, you know, or my cousin, you know, or my best friend, whomever you want making those decisions, you can name in that document, right? And again, if you don't name someone, there are laws that will say, you know, to the next of kin, you know, and do you want that person making that decision. And especially, let's say, if you, oh, I almost forgot too. I was going to say, if you have younger children, you might not want to put them in that position. But that also reminds me of the biggest reason to write down your wishes in a will, because you can also specify your guardianship wishes for any minor children that you have. Especially, let's say, someone who is a widow or a widower, there might not be, another parent. If you've already talked to, an aunt or uncle or grandparents, you can specify who you want to raise those kids. So that was back to traditional wills. But on the living will side, yeah, if you have kids, who are in their late teens or early 20s, you might not want to put that on them. You might want it to be one of your siblings, you might want it to be someone else. But the main thing is that you get to decide, right? And along with that, in those end of life documents, closely related to that are your DNRs or DNIs. The DNR do not resuscitate, the DNI do not intubate. And some people, especially folks who have been dealing with long-term illnesses, they've been fighting for a while, they might sign a DNR and they say, okay, I'm going to go into the hospital this time, but this is the last time. If something happens, please don't, resuscitate me, or please don't intubate me, putting the tubes in for nutrition or breathing. I just don't want to add that suffering to it. So you can specify all of those wishes in these end of life documents. So I would say some of the key end of life documents to have are that last will and testament, number one, a living will / power of attorney, someone to make those medical decisions. You can also have a business power of attorney if you have a business entrepreneurs. If I am incapacitated in any way, this is the person who will keep my business going and make business decisions until I am able, to do so on my own behalf. And that DNR, DNI, and fifth and final, you must have a life insurance policy. Life insurance is a key part of this. Many life insurance policies, some will include funeral expenses, not all do. The particular life insurance policy that I have allows me, to designate a percentage, for my final expenses. But there are even life insurance policies that are solely, for final expenses, as I'm sure Dana can speak more to. But the point is that little bit every month. And, there are, I'm not going to get into the prices of it because I know Dana probably knows, better than I do. But depending on your age and your health, you could pay as little as, I'm sure, $20 a month, for a policy that will, at a minimum, make sure that people aren't passing around a collection plate at your funeral. Because that is what you do not want. Because, again, you do not want your family and friends dealing with that extra trauma after they're already dealing with losing you. So think of it as like your last gift to them. Instead of thinking of it as something morbid, think of it as something kind you can do for those that you love.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I just want to reiterate some things that you had said, the last will and testament, the living will, and also a business will, and the DNR, the DNI, and also too, like you said, the insurance policy is key, but not only the insurance policy that we have to think about, but you also have IRAs. We have the traditional and the Roth. We have the real estate makes up who you are and what you have built. That's a part of your assets that you currently have. And so, just with the insurance, if you have a business and you are a small business owner or entrepreneur, you need to look into key person insurance. Key person insurance protects your business and allows your business to go on even if you pass away. And so it protects you as the key person, but then you also look into succession. Can your business keep going if you wanted to after you pass away? And so that protects your business, your entity, and then also too, that still continues to generate that wealth to in your family as well as the community. And we're talking about continuation. We want to be, you want to continue as not as normal, but continue the wealth flow and the cash flow as time goes on. So I also want to ask you about, so what do you think about people starting the process and of a will? What do you think about that? What's your take on that? Because a lot of people say, oh, I don't have enough, like you said, before, that I don't have enough. But what is your take on people starting that process themselves and then later on getting someone to talking to a lawyer?
Yeah, and I think that there's good news and bad news on that front. The good news is if you just want a simple document that covers you and makes sure that you have the bare minimum that you need, there are tons of websites now that for a very low cost, you can sort of like call them paint by numbers legal documents, or just fill in the blank, and they can customize it, for your state. And that's a good thing. But the bad news about those documents is that they're not going to cover every situation. And in particular, and you don't have to take my word for this, you can Google this, they don't handle every unique situation. And I think one of the situations that they don't do a good job at covering is business debts or business successions and things like that. So what you want to do, but still start the process. If all you can afford is to go to one of these, online websites, put in, $29.95, $59.95, whatever you can afford, to get the ball rolling, do that. And then, make sure that, you have an attorney look at it, because another knock on some of the websites are quite good and have actual attorneys working for them, and they update their material and they keep it in line with every state has different laws about what makes a will legal, right? And some of them are very arcane and they might seem silly, but they're important. So you don't want to go to one of the off-brand websites that will have you thinking, oh, this is a great legal will, in the state of North Carolina, but actually this website has not provided the proper format or requirements for witnesses or whatever it is. So what you need to do is, before you pick one of those websites, do your research and see which ones, A, have what you need, but B, have a good reputation. And that will get the ball rolling and make you just, even if it just makes you less scared about the estate planning process, I think it's a good step in the right direction.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just in doing my research here in the state of North Carolina, and anywhere, wherever you are, you can do your own research, because Google is our friend. I mean, knowledge is power. But here in the state of North Carolina, of course, you can document. That means you have to take that time to sit down and to think, because now you become selfless. You start thinking about my family, my mom, my dad, whoever it is. You become selfless because you're taking responsibility and saying, I want you all to be okay, because we want people to be emotionally okay and not having to worry about certain things. And so, you create the initial document. That means you have to sit down and start thinking. You need to designate an executor of the estate. You need to appoint a guardian if you have children. That is most important, that you appoint a guardian. And then also to name your beneficiaries. Be very clear who you want to be beneficiaries and contingent beneficiaries. And also designate all your assets. You have to sit down and look at the bank accounts that you have, the real estate, anything that is a part of your estate. You need to be able to write those assets down and then designate who will be parties to those assets. And then also too, the final thing is, you can have a signing right there in your house, and you can have your family around and ask a witness to be there, and that you sign it, and then you have to get it and have a notary there and get it notarized. And then what you do, the last step is, of course, you store it in a safe or in a safe place, and making sure that executor of the estate knows where to get those documents. And I think, just taking those steps, I think that is very vital. And so let me ask you, what is the role of a trust in estate planning?
Oh, I'm sorry. May I, before I go to that, you just made me think of something else very briefly I'll address. When Dana mentioned beneficiaries, it made me think about the idea, estate planning. Please don't think of this as one thing. Oh, good, I'm done. I never have to touch this again. You have to update this document throughout your lifetime. Plan like once a year, once every couple years, to review it. Review your beneficiaries, review these things. Let's say when you first take out your life insurance policy, you're married and your spouse is your beneficiary, and then you get a divorce, but you haven't changed your beneficiaries. Then you're giving all this money to this and that you might not want to have. Another issue that comes up sometimes, even though most states have laws, that try to help prevent this, is afterborn children. Let's say you have this great will and you have this great plan, and then another child is born or adopted, or comes into your life, through fostering or some other sort of way, and that person's not included in the estate plan. So you make a point to yourself to update your plan periodically as your life circumstances change. As you add assets, you might want to, amend your will. If you buy new property, sell off property. Just think of when you make these major steps, that you should, be thinking, okay, major life changes means I should be going back over, my documents just to make sure everything is in order.
Right. And that's some good information. So, one thing that I educate or tell my clients for insurance is yearly review. And when you come into contact with clients, I just had a client, and it's our responsibility. It's my fiduciary responsibility for whoever I come in contact with when I write a policy is to, as things change, and we need to make sure that what if in the event that something happens to you, that your documents are all up to date, and that everything will go smoothly. So make sure that, I would say, an anniversary of when you update your insurance policy and get that annual review, even if the person who sold you the policy has not contacted you, you can call them or call the insurance company, and they can send you an annual statement, as well as you can request for someone to go over that policy with you. And so I would suggest, when you do that annual review for your insurance policy, also do your estate or do a review of your will and estate planning. All right. So what is the role of a trust in an estate planning?
Sure. Those of you who are listening, probably remembered a moment ago when we began, I mentioned that Aretha Franklin exposed her heirs to a lot of tax liabilities. Well, the difference between a trust and a will is a trust is this legal entity. You can place money in a trust. So you've probably, if you've watched any sort of 80s, 90s teen movies, this trust fund, kid or whatever. Well, funds can be put in a trust. And by doing so, you can protect wealth in that way. Or if you do this thing, which is called a trust inter vivos, which is Latin for living trust, you can give your family assets while you're still alive. And that way, you not only know where the money is gone and you have that peace of mind, but you can, and again, I'm not an accountant and I am not a tax lawyer, but you avoid some of the tax burdens also. So there are a lot of different things that you can do. So the difference between the will and the trust is the will have an executor and the trust will have a trustee, and you can specify, different things with the trust. And, it's really good. A lot of people, who have minor children like to specify, okay, this trust is for, college education, or, the funds from this trust, can be released for other purposes once the person reaches the age of 21, or they can get money for other purposes with the consent of the trustee. So it just gives you another layer of planning, to make sure that the money is going where you want it to go and for what you want it to be used for.
Absolutely. So I want to note that there is two type of trust, the revocable and the irrevocable trust. So you may want to
Yes.
go ahead and Google those items because they do two different things. You have a revocable and an irrevocable trust. And the people that you need to help you establish a trust is you can go to the bank to open up a trust account, as well as a lawyer to assist you with that. So, you need to look into that because sometimes you can go ahead and put that those assets into the trust. And when you pass away, now I'm not giving advice, but I've seen some of the wealthy, this is how they go about business and securing their estate. So they put all of their assets in the trust. And then what happens is all of the bills get paid first from the trust, and then from there is dispersed to the beneficiaries. So that is something that, that is something that you can, look into. You can Google it. You can ask a CPA or a certified financial planner. It's many people to assist you in this estate planning process. But the objective today is to bring awareness of why this is important and why we should get this started. Even if we just start by creating the document, I think that's, 20% of making a right decision because you're becoming selfless. You're caring more about others and you're wanting to make sure that they will be okay. From your perspective, why is estate planning critically important for small business owners and entrepreneurs?
Oh, so many reasons. But if I had to pick the primary reason, I would say, especially for entrepreneurs of color and African American women entrepreneurs as well, I don't have to tell anyone on this line the statistics. We know that women in general make 77 cents on the dollar that men do, and Black women, I think it's 66 cents, 68 cents. I haven't looked at this year's statistics yet. But the point is that Black women are a lot further down on the economic ladder than we deserve to be. And what that means is all of the money that we have fought so hard to earn, we need to make sure that we preserve that money for the future. And I know that in our culture, there's such a stigma, around talking about money and talking about, it's a taboo topic, and for a lot of reasons, and some of that is understandable. However, if you don't talk about money to at least your lawyer and your CPA and whoever else is helping you out with your estate planning, you're going to be in a world of hurt, and that wealth let me rephrase that. The money you have worked so hard to earn will not become wealth, because wealth is generational, right? Wealth is passed on from generation to generation, right? So whatever you have to pass on to your children and grandchildren that will make their lives easier, you want to maximize that, and if you don't work to maximize that, then basically you're letting them start the race basically where you started it, instead of passing the baton to them so they can run farther. And so it's all about setting up, the next generation of, young Black folks to be in a better position, than we were when we started.
Absolutely. And she made some great points to that. And we want to make sure that as business owners, and we're building and we're out here creating businesses, because there has been a spike in business, small business origination, and people are in their homes at this time figuring out, hey, let me create this business because I want to be in control of my cash flow. But also being in control of that cash flow and creating those profits, you have to be aware that we have to also protect those assets, protect those profits. So in the event that something does happen to you. And so let me ask you, just for reference, what age do you recommend to start your will or estate planning?
Well, I mean, I don't think it is. I think everyone should have life insurance, no matter how old you are. Anything could happen. So, life insurance, and it's not. This is one that's really hard to talk about, but there's even life insurance policies, for children. And I know no one wants to think about that, but it's something to have. So everyone should have life insurance no matter what age. In terms of wills, that's harder. I would say, at a minimum, age 21, you're out of the house, you're working, that sort of thing, you might want to start thinking about it. But the one thing I would say, no matter how old you are, if you have kids, that is the time you definitely need to, or when you get married. Either one of those life-changing events is something that, yeah, you need to be planning, because you want to make sure that your spouse or your child, is taking, or children are taken care of. So those would be the life events that I would say for sure. And those, could be any age, So those
Right.
life events are important.
Absolutely. So you said it that, it's really no particular age, but when you have life events such as marriage or having a baby or children or adopting or anything of that nature, it is imperative that you have a will. Even if you're single and you just own a home and you have been building and things of that nature, you need to have a will to protect your assets. Because when you think about it from a financial perspective, we're talking about your whole financial portfolio, and that is your whole life. Your financial portfolio represents who you are and what you worked so hard for. And so we want to create your portfolio. We just want to get ready to wrap up, because I think we're about a little over 45 minutes, and I know people have to get back to working, because this is a lunch and learn. So just wrapping up, do you have any resources or recommendations out there that can assist others?
Well, not to be tongue in cheek, but we've already mentioned Google several times. And what I will do before this session ends, I'll put a link to some of the articles that I've written in the live comments, so people can look at those, because we wanted this to be more of a fun lunch and learn. But when I wrote those, there's more of the statistics, and there's lists of the documents that you should have, and why you need them, when you need them. And I think that those would be good resources. And another good resource, this does not have to be super, expensive thing. There are lawyers and law firms who do pro bono work. There are law schools that have legal clinics. I mean, there are all sorts of community resources. Lots of departments of social services will host events like this. So don't think, oh my gosh, I can never afford the help I need to get what I need from this. So please, please take the time to go and look at the different resources that are out there, and you'll probably find some checklists that, say, what kind of estate plan do I need? Do I need a will? Do I need trust? So please, just, there's lots of resources out there. So please just, take the time to find out what fits your situation, and do not be afraid to reach out to an insurance agent, CPA, attorney for the help that you need.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't want people to get afraid of the money cost to it, because it's going to cost people in the long run after you've gone more than it will cost you now. So just thinking about Aretha Franklin, John Singleton, and Prince, just imagine what their family is going through and how much anguish and emotional tension it's causing them on the other side. And so we want our loved ones to feel, we want them to mourn, but mourn without financial worry. We want them to be harmonious and loving at that time and celebrating your life, but not fighting over or bickering about the small little intangible things, because it's so much to. And then also too, we want your wealth that you have created, and also to the I think we just lost her for a moment here, but she'll probably be back. But we want, succession. We want your wealth to continue throughout your family from generations to generation, because there is so much wealth that is generated in the African American community and other communities as well. But we need to really look into what it is really about. Keeping wealth as well as building wealth. Let me put her back on. I think we lost her. Here we go.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
There you go. So, no worries. And so, free to come on today to share some information as well as your expertise. It was just a whim. And I said, well, let me see if I can contact her to see if she would come on this show, because, the part of Sisters to Dream Network and Investment Group, of course, is about community empowerment and to be an activist in my community. In the community, of course, I have always been driven by financial. That's my background. And so that is one of the 9 pillars that are set up by Sisters to Dream Network and Investment Group. And just, to name a few: is spiritual housing, financial, personal development, community, beauty and grooming, entrepreneurship, education, and health and nutrition. And so previously, from my other lives, I have touched on entrepreneurship, and now I'm diving into the financial thing, because I think those two go hand in hand. And so when we have a break in one of those 9 pillars, then we're not living a harmonious life, and it can cause disruption in our families, and personally, it can impact us in a big way. And so I just really recommend that, we really look into, the estate planning process. And like I said, the purpose of this Lunch and Learn is to purely educate, to provoke thought, to say, hey, I need to look into this as I'm building my business, because, we're building, but we also have to protect. So I do have a question. It says, is there a website that you recommend for a living will?
There's so many of them, and I don't want to recommend any particular one, because they're not giving me a commission for. No, I'm just kidding. But even if they were, there's a lot of them. There's 3 I can think of off the top of my head. And again, I don't want to give anyone a particular plug, but they're out there. And sometimes I will say, if you go on Groupon, some of them even offer discounted, significantly discounted rates to help you get your will done. And the other reason why I'm not going to recommend a specific one is because I encourage everyone to do the research to make sure that the will that you create, whatever website you pick, is on definitely crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's that you need in your state. I cannot emphasize enough how important that is. So in some states you need 2 witnesses. Some states they have to be notarized. Some states they don't have to be notarized. Some states accept electronic signatures. Some don't. I cannot tell you in any confidence, oh yeah, trust so-and-so because they're perfect in California. You have to do that research. And yeah, I wish I could say that there was one that you could just trust 100%, but just say, for instance, if you live in North Carolina. Both Dana and I are in North Carolina, so we use North Carolina a lot. So which website does good North Carolina wills? And, you know, look at the Google or Yelp reviews for that website and see what they're saying, you know, before you literally sign on the dotted line.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, today was about getting started and doing the research because, you know, just in getting this Q&A discussion, I had to do my research as well as she had a wealth of information. And for us to be able to collaborate together and to have a talk about this so that we can bring awareness. But, you know, when I Googled just for North Carolina, there was one set of steps. And then in comparison to Maryland, it was something totally different. So, you know, I have connection with North Carolina and Maryland, but we don't want to, you know, give that advice and then you come. We just want to, again, provoke the thought to get this started and to start doing your research. That this, you know, it doesn't have to be a daily thing, but I think, you know, when you're preparing estate planning, I think it has to be like almost a monthly thing until you get it to a point where it's written and it's finalized and in stone, and then it's something that you just update on an annual basis based on your different changes in your lifestyle. So another segment with you, and it's going to be more about community. And I think the next segment that we're going to be doing is going to be about voting and voting rights. Is that correct?
Yes, and I'm very excited about that.
So we had a brief conversation about that. So, you know, we're continuing on our relationship and let that blossom. We don't know where this. 1 second. Okay, so you did. So what I'm going to do after this live is that she put some links to some websites. And so I'm going to publish. I will give out some general information and some guidelines of how to start creating your will. And then also to, of course, I said before that I was a licensed insurance agent. Now, you know, if you have children, it's a good time, and small children, it's a good time to get an insurance policy on them because if you get the insurance policy when they're young, then they'll be guaranteed insurability when they get older. And so that has a major impact. And of course, with children, if you have a policy when they're young and they're diagnosed later on with some type, make sure that you protect your family and your assets as well as the money that you generate. So Nareissa, I thank you so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Have a great one.
Yes, ma'am. Same here.
All right, bye-bye.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.